everybody, my name is Kate and I am here today to talk to you about commas and how to use them in a sentence. Sometimes people will think that you put a comma in a sentence anywhere that you would pause if you were talking through that sentence, but that's not always the case, so that's not a great rule to follow. Instead, there are very specific places that you want to put a comma in your sentence. If you're separating out in a positive, if you have a list, if you have an introductory or a concluding element, these are all places where you would use a comma, but they're not the places that we're going to be talking about today. So if that didn't mean anything to you, that's fine. We're not going to be talking about it. Today we are going to be talking about two main reasons why you would use a comma. If you have two independent clauses that are joined with a conjunction, or if you have a dependent clause that occurs before the independent clause in the sentence. So let's break that down and talk about what that means using three sentences as examples. Luke thought he was an orphan, but he was wrong. Here we have two independent clauses that have been joined with a conjunction. An independent clause is basically the part of a sentence that is a complete sentence before any extra information is removed. So here we have two complete sentences. Luke thought he was an orphan. He was wrong. Those are both complete sentences. We've decided to join them together using a conjunction. A conjunction is a joining word in a sentence, and, but, or, nor, so, yet. These are all conjunctions that you can use to join parts of a sentence together. So since we have two independent clauses, two complete thoughts, Luke thought he was an orphan, he was wrong, we join them together with a conjunction. We always put a comma before that conjunction. Before, not after. In our second sentence, Luke thought he was an orphan and an only child. We still have a conjunction. We have our and, our joining word. But we don't have two independent clauses. Luke thought he was an orphan is an independent clause. It's a complete sentence all on its own. But an only child is not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought. What we have here instead of two independent clauses is an independent clause and a dependent clause. A dependent clause is the part of the sentence that relies on the rest of the sentence to make sense. So it's dependent on the independent clause, and the independent clause is independent. It's not dependent on anything. This is really a two-part list. Luke thought he was an orphan. Luke thought he was an only child. You could add a third item in, and then you would put in commas. Luke thought he was an orphan, comma, an only child, comma, and that his parents were normal. There we have a list, so you do use your commas. But when you have an independent clause and a dependent clause, and the dependent clause comes second, you don't use a comma. That comes second part becomes important when we move on to our third sentence. Here we have a dependent clause followed by an independent clause. Because he thought he was an orphan, Luke was surprised to meet his father and twin sister. Because he thought he was an orphan is a dependent clause. It's dependent on the rest of this sentence to make sense. Luke was surprised to meet his father and his twin sister is an independent clause. It makes sense all on its own. When your dependent clause comes before the independent clause in the sentence, then you need to use a comma to separate those out. So, because he thought he was an orphan, dependent clause. Luke was surprised to meet his father and twin sister. You could actually flip this around. Luke was surprised to meet his father and twin sister because he thought he was an orphan. And then you no longer use the comma. So that's a good way to check and see if you have a dependent clause there, as if you can flip it around. So I hope that helped. Two ways to use a comma, two independent clauses that have been joined with a conjunction, and when you have a dependent clause with an independent clause after it. And I hope that helped. Have a great day.